Aww, yeah! It's time for another episode of We Love Comics, the show where we love comics, and you should too. I am one of your hosts, Vactor, and I'm here with the mighty Marcus Seaberry. Seaberry, how you doing?
I'm good, because as you said, I am the mighty. And
yeah!
the mighty, yo!
The Honorable Hunter Camp joining us.
Oh yeah, here we go. Thor time.
And we have a special guest joining us. We have somebody who is always worthy, somebody who is comedically tall, somebody who is a sometimes writer at Complex, GQ, and Spy.com. We have the wonderfully talented William Goodman on the show today. Mr. Goodmans, how are you today?
What a warm welcome. I am tremendously underqualified to be here with you gentlemen, but happy nevertheless.
Oh, yeah.
You like a podcasting OG, man. Don't be like that.
Mr. Goodman.
And another life, brother. That was me.
And we had Mr. Goodman's former podcast host, Dean Davenport, on our Tim Sale retrospective. So now we have completed the Between the Panels trifecta.
Yeah. We collected the whole wave.
we got the Between the Panels stones.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that is correct. We have the Infinity Gauntlet of Goodman and Davenport, but we are
Infinity Goodman.
Very happy to have Mr. Goodman here today to talk all about Thor Love and Thunder. So in case you didn't know, you can always leave us a comment down below here on YouTube, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, don't forget to click all of those Infinity Gems and leave us a 5-gem review. Thank you very much. I am very pleased to announce we are part of a podcast network, the GeekSoToSpeak podcast network. You can find us over at GeekSoToSpeak.com/network. All of our podcasts, which I will be talking about at the end of the show. But I wanted to start this show off right. Now, Mr. Goodman was not here for our Thor retrospective. So real quick, Mr. Goodman, what are your thoughts on Thor 1, 2, and 3?
Sure. So, I during our time in Between the Panels, we Dane and I hit the Thor stuff pretty heavily. It's well documented. Dane and I have a bit of history with the screenwriters of the original Thor, Ashley Edward Miller and Zach Stentz. So we did a lot when that first movie came out because we knew the screenwriters, and I think we're generally positive on that movie and the overall Shakespearean tones of that. And I don't know if we ended up reviewing Thor: The Dark World or not, but I can't say that I was a fan of that movie and how that movie was executed really in any way, shape, or form, but really found Thor Ragnarok to be very, very engaging, as I believe the majority of folks did. I thought that Taika coming into that franchise and infusing it with his sensibilities from movies like Boy and What We Do in the Shadows, and also Hunt for the Wilder People, was really kind of the reinvention that the character needed, and really played to Hemsworth's strengths as one of our, I think, really naturally talented comedians out there. I think the work that he's done in movies like Ghostbusters, and also Ghostbusters really the main one. Vacation, I've seen parts of his output from that via YouTube and so forth. But I felt that Ragnarok was exactly the kind of reinvention that the franchise needed after I would say what is arguably the worst MCU film, maybe next to Eternals. So that's kind of that is my kind of quick down and dirty history. But was definitely think that Taika was the right person to refresh things for
Excellent.
This character.
So I think you're on the same wavelength as all of us. I did want to let everybody know we are going to be spoiling Thor Love and Thunder. So if you have not seen the film, go ahead and pause this and come back after you've seen.
Wait, I need to leave then because I haven't seen it. So,
what? Mr. Goodman, you are here
joking.
for the express purpose of reviewing Thor Love and Thunder.
No, I've seen it twice at this point. So
I have as well. And I think I would like to start this review with Mr. Goodman's thoughts overall for Thor Love and Thunder. Please let us enlighten us, Mr. Goodman.
Sure. So, full disclosure, I saw the movie pretty early because I participated in the Love and Thunder junket, and then also saw it again a second time because I had the opportunity to do that before filing my review that I ended up writing for Complex. And I think there's a lot that I really enjoy about this movie, and I think there's a lot that just doesn't quite work for me, honestly. We can start with the good and then go into the bad. I always like to do good before bad, but I think the performances in this, in particular, Christian Bale and Natalie Portman, I think are really really good, and Hemsworth too. Uh, I think part of what I rubbed up against was the how just how much there is in this movie and how much the script tries to take on and what that ultimately does to the two stories that I think it's really trying to tell, and how it kind of shortchanges both of those. So I think if this had been a movie that was more focused on Thor versus Gore, I think it would have been ultimately a little bit stronger. Or if it had been, and I posited this in my complex review, if it had basically been the before sunrise before sunset trilogy basically of just a relationship drama between Jane and Thor, I think that really would have worked, because the Gore stuff is really prevalent in kind of the first half, and then the Taika and his co-writer really, whose name escapes me at this particular moment. I'll go back through and look up her name, but she did a show called Sweet Vicious. But the back half really keys into that Thor and Jane relationship, and I think that stuff really, really, really works. But I think you end up shortchanging both in your attempt to try and cover both. I mean, the Jason Aaron storylines that this movie covers are two modern Thor classics, basically, and were very, very extensive storylines in Jason Aaron's Thor, both through just his regular Thor and then the Mighty Thor storyline. And so I think trying to tackle both of those is an admirable task, but I think the movie kind of collapses on the weight of itself trying to do that. And then this is not really something that I brought up in my review because I didn't have a ton of space for it, but tonally, I think the movie's kind of all over the map as well. It's one thing to have, jokes, but I think sometimes those jokes come at the expense of moments that I think are pretty serious, and not every single moment needs to be kind of undercut with these moments of levities. I think there is a point in time in which these Marvel movies can be serious and have a level of gravity to them without necessarily having to have jokes every 5 seconds. So I'm mixed. I do think there's a lot to admire, but that's kind of my overall take on it.
Yeah, I looked up. The writer is Jennifer Caton Robinson.
That is right.
Co-writer. Mr. Hunter Camp.
Yes.
You were
go ahead.
talking to me in the theater.
I was
letting me know what your thoughts were. So I know. Why don't you tell our listeners what you thought?
So just kind of in general, I really, really, really loved this movie. I don't want to kind of classify it in like perfect category or near perfect category like Ragnarok was. Because it's just insane. Like it's completely out of control, and I mean that in the best way and the worst way possible. Because it's a 1980s like heavy metal album that's just on screen, and it's got the elements of the the love story, but like also like fighting this super galactic battle, and then the evil like killing God aspect of it. Like those are all like almost tropes of like Warhammer type heavy metal from the 80s, like not quite hair metal, but like more of the not bolt thrower, but like power metal, late 80s like power metal. Like that's what this movie was, and I loved it for that. I loved how chaotic it was, because it was incredibly chaotic. Like it was all over the place. The first bit of the movie is like, my child is dead, like I'm gonna kill God, and it's like, yes, that's great. Like what a great concept that was, and like there wasn't a better person to play that character than Christian Bale. Now I haven't read all of like Aaron's run by any means, so I don't want to like base too much off of my opinion based off on that. So Gore is a new character to me, right? I don't have a lot of experience with Gore, but Christian Bale encapsulated what I would think a character who was a strongly religious man who gives up on religion and goes and wants to kill God. Like the concept of like attacking and dethroning God or killing God is like such a really interesting thing. So, but it's also incredibly serious. Like it's an incredibly serious idea and it's an incredibly serious concept because of all the implications that has in it, because it's acknowledging the existence of God, it's acknowledging creation, but also kind of like we're at the whim of, like we're at God's whims, so when you think of it that way, and it's like that is such a high concept thing, that's its own movie, like that's its own story to tell. That's a 2-hour movie to explore that properly. That's 2 hours by itself. The story between Jane and Thor also, like that's a story on its own, because it's like we were in love and now we have to get back together, but then it's like, oh, surprisingly I have cancer. You know what I mean? And so it's that story, it would be on its own a 2-hour story, right? Like Thor and Jane getting together, going on adventures, and then at the end of it finding out that she had been diagnosed with cancer, and like that's something that she's hiding. And then the story of her passing and getting to that point, I think, is its own movie too. So I think all of these are 3 things, and each one of them are serious. Each one of them, like with the exception of the love story, like that would by itself would, I think, be tonally what this movie should have been. But I do love it. I really do. There was moments in it, like the moments between the characters and between the actors really did hit home for me. Like I did kind of get emotional in the theater. Like it worked. Like even regardless of how wacky, and I don't even want to say wacky, I wanted to say irreverent. Like his humor is really, really irreverent, and I appreciate that because that is my style of humor. So that worked for me, and like the theater was cracking up, and it's like, yes, that's fine, but like those stories do need, I think, a little bit more room to breathe. But I don't think that was incredibly, I don't think that did too much to its detriment as far as enjoying the movie, because like again, when I went into it, I had really, really low expectations because the reviews were coming out bad. Like some of the stuff that I'd seen where people were just shocked. It's like, oh well, he was supposed to be the savior, like of Marvel or movies in general. Like we love Taika. And then to see kind of like where it's getting its bad reviews.
The internet has really turned on Taika.
Yeah, and I don't get it. Yeah, I don't understand either. Because
I have a theory on some of that. This is something I wanted to bring up later on, but I have a couple of ideas as to why that may be the case. But yeah, you're definitely right. It's been interesting to watch over the course of the weekend. Knives are out.
I think that there are some good points with, I think, some of the things that he's done over the weekend. And I don't want, like, one of the things that I noticed and I'll bring it up now. One of the things that I noticed in the movie was like how CGI'd some things looked, and some like characters, I was like, that kind of looks weird. Like, I'm not sure why they did it like that. But at the same time, like, this is not a criticism of visual effects artists, especially knowing like what Marvel visual effects artists go through. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, well, that was the detriment, because it didn't really take away from my enjoyment. But overall, is it the best Marvel movie? No. Is it the best Thor movie? No. Is it in my top? Maybe, because I really had a lot of fun with it. And like, it's the type of thing that pleases me, like as a fan of power metal. Like, this was a power metal album. It's not too serious. It deals with serious concepts, but it's not, it doesn't take itself too seriously but I feel like almost like it should have taken itself too seriously in moments. So when you have something like Gore the God Butcher, and specifically Christian Bale's performance of that character in the way that it was, I feel like you had to do something like way, way more serious there. But that's my take.
This crap was mid to the mid, homie. And let me tell you why. It feel like 2 movies to me. It feel like a real goofy movie where, hey, my ex-girlfriend's got my old hammer, and now she's a Thor. Herp to dirt. Then the next scene is, oh, it's Gore the God Butcher. He's a bad mofo. And it's all creepy. It kept jumping from one tone to the other tone. And I kept waiting for some kind of connector or happy medium, or I needed the twain to meet, if you will.
Hmm.
And I did not get that. It is a discredit to Christian Bale because, good grief, this man was putting in work, y'all. It reminds me of what I said about Matthew Fox in that Alex Cross movie with Tyler Perry playing Alex Cross. I always said, it's like in Matthew Fox's mind, he's in a much better movie. And I wanted to see that movie. That's how I feel about Christian Bale's performance. Again, the man was putting in work, you know, as a student of acting, you know, I was like, yo, he is making good choices. He is interesting to watch on screen from a technical standpoint. And like also, I felt sympathetic for him at first because his God was an asshat. When I saw him looking at the sword, I was like, oh, well, yeah, you gotta. I mean, your God was
Yeah.
complete a-hole. You kind of got to get him. Like,
Right.
you know, you know what I'm saying? Your God got to get the shield. But I was just like, man, I wanted more. I wanted it to make sense. And I was hoping against hope that I finally get to see Beta Ray Bill, but still no Beta Ray Bill. I'm just like, y'all gonna keep hating on my boy Beta Ray Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he not a cold Thor. Like, he ain't got a hammer called Stormbreaker. Y'all just got like a version of his hammer all up in the movie. Just no Beta Ray Bill. Y'all better put some respect on Beta Ray Bill name. If you don't know him, do your Googles. Do your Googles and do your Wikipedias. Beta Ray Bill, that dude. Man, it just didn't come together for me. And like, cause I already taped my CineSundry review. It's coming soon on the On Location Memphis YouTube channel. Quick plug. But I'm not understanding Phase 4.
Yeah, I wanted to get to
Yeah.
that. Yeah, in my take on it, but yeah, Phase 4. Not only is it the longest phase so far, but it is longer than all three phases combined before this. I'm also kind of wondering what is this leading up to, and what each one kind of felt like there was something at the end of the rainbow, and then Phase 4, it just feels like, oh, this is just going to keep going. I don't know when this is going to end. So, yeah, I'm a little bit confused on that as well. But I enjoyed the film myself. I agree with everything everyone has said so far. There's kind of issues with the tone and the pacing, even combining all of these elements, trying to push everything into one. I don't know, I kind of feel a little bit of Spider-Man 3 syndrome of, all right, we got to push in all these different storylines. And I came into it with super high expectations because, number one, I love Taika Waititi. Thor Ragnarok, one of my favorite MCU films, and these Jason Aaron stories are some of my favorites. Like Goodman said, these are some of the greatest Thor stories of all time. Actually, my favorite Thor stories of all time, and trying to do justice to all of them within a 2-hour movie, very difficult. So I don't think they quite stuck the landing as far as giving justice to all of them. Like they shoved them in there, but did they have enough room to breathe? I don't think so. But again, I agree with everything everyone said, including the performances by Christian Bale. I'll even throw in the Chris Hemsworth performance. Like Goodman said, his comedic timing, and Natalie Portman coming back to the MCU. That was fantastic. Seeing her again and seeing her get another chance at Jane Foster, because I think there was a whole lot of animosity, and there was kind of a period where it just seemed like she would never come back and never play that character again. So I really enjoyed seeing her come back, and also seeing her try to do that comedy as well, just like Hemsworth. I just kept thinking of her Saturday Night Live hosting appearance every time I saw her.
Yeah, which I loved.
Which is that's one of my favorite episodes of SNL.
Yeah, 100%
of all time.
Should not to quickly interject, but would it be worthwhile to kind of like run through why Portman was like potentially uninterested in coming back in this, just for folks that maybe not have context? So
yeah,
before Alan Taylor of Terminator Genesis fame, and also of he's longtime Sopranos director, directed episodes of Game of Thrones. Before he took over Thor: The Dark World, Patty Jenkins of Wonder Woman fame was actually supposed to be directing that movie. And Natalie Portman went out of her way, I think, to really be the facilitator between Marvel Studios and Patty and bring her on, and that was kind of her choice. And I believe, there were some creative differences. I'm not sure what exactly those things were. My guess is it probably had to do something with kind of setting up of the Aether and the Power Stone, and so nevertheless,
all right.
When Marvel kind of unceremoniously let Patty go, I think that really, really frustrated Natalie Portman. And Kevin Feige's come out and said afterwards, and Natalie's kind of talked around it as well, that she wasn't opposed to it, and not to toot my own horn, but in the interview that I did with her, I think she made it seem, at least, that she was receptive to it if it was a good idea, and that I think some of the things that happened in Endgame when maybe did not fall in that, or they just didn't even try and bother because they had this leftover footage from Thor: The Dark World that they're able to kind of incorporate into that. But not a particularly good thing if you can't even get Natalie Portman to come back for the end credit sequence.
Right.
That Thor: The Dark World end credit sequence is not Natalie Portman that Hemsworth is kissing. It's actually his wife, Elsa Pataky, in a wig.
Nice.
So great that these Thor movies kind of continue to be a family affair. I believe Elsa Pataky also has a cameo in this as the Wolf Woman, basically. Right. But the relationship there for a while, I think, was pretty strained, and I do think it took Taika kind of coming to Portman with this material and saying, not only do we want to just not only make you an action star, but we want to give you this weighty cancer storyline as well. And that, I think, was enough to incentivize her and bring her back. But yeah, I mean, for a long time, it seemed like that was kind of really, really off the table.
Yeah, when I saw her on the red carpet for Endgame, was it in Endgame? Yeah, it was Endgame. I was like, whoa, she's there. And then she came out at Comic-Con, had the hammer. So yeah, that was very interesting, seeing that whole circle, coming full circle of having her back in the MCU, having her come back to Jane Foster. I think you either love Taika's humor or you don't. I think it's kind of very polarizing, to the point where some people were turned off as too much comedy, of too much. I myself personally felt like it was in line with the previous Taika comedy that we've seen, and it almost to the point where there was no restraint of Taika. There was no telling him, hey, we need to pull it back maybe a little bit. And because of the success of Ragnarok, now this is all conjecture, I don't know exactly what happened, but he was, let's release, give him the free reign, do whatever you want. Here's all the comedy you want, throw it in there. We haven't even mentioned Tessa Thompson yet.
That's something I wanted to bring up. Tessa, gotta love her, is woefully underused in this movie, to a point where it's really, really frustrating, considering how much of a major part of Ragnarok she is. And yeah, to your point, Vactor, really, in a podcast I was listening to today brought this up. So I'm kind of cribbing this phrase from them directly, but really high batting average for Korg in this movie. Just a lot of Korg time.
Yes.
And it's a little bit of Taika maybe perhaps getting high on his own supply. But again, that is kind of what you get if you're bringing in Taika for these movies, right? I do wonder, there was a really great New York Times profile by Dave Iskoff on Taika prior to this movie coming out, and I wonder if this is just a symptom of Taika's doing a lot right now.
Right.
And
yeah, he is. Yeah.
I wonder, if this is circumstances of maybe being a little spread too thin. And something I think we'll also probably touch on is perhaps the MCU being spread too thin as well.
Yeah. Seaberry, or Hunter, you're gonna say something?
Yeah, the comment about the MCU being spread too thin, I think that that's a really good point. One thing to kind of factor into what Trent was saying before about this being the most hours, like it's the technically longest version of the phases, right? Like that is something to do with TV, obviously. Like that's a big chunk of it, because that adds so many hours. I think that we're 100% correct in saying that the MCU is spread too thin, obviously, because I think there's just too much. Like, I don't mind watching a show every once in a while. Like, I don't really watch a lot of TV, but at the same time, like, if it's good, I want to watch it. Same thing with movies. And I had seen literally everything up through Endgame. And then when I don't know if it's just the release schedule that they had, but or the timing of when they decided like, hey, this is where we're going to start to roll things out. Like, I didn't see Black Widow. Like, I haven't seen Shang-Chi. Like, I have not seen the Eternals. Like, none of these movies have I seen. And then the TV shows I just can't keep up with. So it is too much. And it's like, maybe pare down on half, like maybe not have 85 shows, maybe only have like 27, you know?
What's interesting as you bring that up is actually the release schedule for this year is really not that much different than what it was last year. We're getting 3 shows and 3 movies, but I think all of that in a condensed 2-year period with, some shows that I think honestly have been, a bit lackluster, and I guess last year we technically got 4 because we had WandaVision, we had Falcon and Winter Soldier, we had Loki, and we had Hawkeye as well.
Yeah.
Out of those 4, I would say probably the 2 that work the best are probably Loki, which is pending Miss Marvel, I think, landing this finale. We're recording this the day before the Miss Marvel finale hits. I think Loki so far and away is the best thing they've done. WandaVision did not work quite as well for me as I think it did for some other people. I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is unfortunately a victim of just some COVID related issues that just totally do not really bring that home together in a really effective way. I think part of Hawkeye worked before that series in particular really feels like we're using this to set up 50 different future Marvel TV shows in a way that is kind of frustrating. Moon Knight just fundamentally did not work for me really much past the acting at all. I think the storyline in that was pretty blasé. And then, Miss Marvel, I think pending that, I think will be up there with Loki, but that's a lot in a condensed period, right? On top of having, all of these Marvel movies as well. So,
and Seaberry, this was 50 hours of content in 2 years.
My Lord. All right, well, look. I've seen all the series. I mean, most of the series worked for me. The only series that I was just like, what the hell on was Moon Knight. Like, when I did a deep dive for that on CineSundry, I had to pull in one of my comics OGs that was even more, deep than me. And I'm pretty deep in, obscure Marvel lore. But man, like cinematically, man, like I saw Black Widow. I was like, it's cool, but what's the point of this? Oh, y'all trying to set up the new Black Widow. So we had to go through a whole damn movie for y'all to set up the new Black Widow. All right, got you. Then Shang-Chi was cool. Eternals probably should have been a series because they just crammed way too much in that sucker. I love Spider-Man No Way Home. But then after that, it was like, Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. That was kind of mid to me. And now we got this, what I call Thor mid and thunder. Like, it's just super mid, man. It's just, all right. Like, and all I know about Phase 4 is Wong's the Sorcerer Supreme. And boy, that guy gets around. And Kang is supposed to be the big bad. But we ain't even seen Kang yet.
Is he supposed to be the big bad?
That I think that's the working theory, but that's the thing is we don't know. And actually, now that Seaberry lays this out, I realized we got 4 shows and 4 movies last year, so slightly more than we're used to, right? But typically, the cadence for Marvel movies over the last couple of years has been anywhere from 2 to 3. Yeah. Nevertheless, I think that's part of the issue. I think kind of the unofficial reading of the tea leaves here is that we are headed towards Secret Wars, but I think even within that. I'm going to assume all of you guys have read the Hickman run. That is a weighty storyline. And to dive into that, I think in the next 5 years, I don't know how they're going to set all of that up. And to me, setting up Kang as the villain of that movie is kind of fundamentally, unless they're planning on doing a hybrid of kind of the original Jim Shooter Secret Wars and Hickman's Secret Wars and kind of pulling in incursions and so forth. That Hickman thing is far more of a Fantastic Four based thing than it is an Avengers based thing. I think it spun out of Avengers stuff. But when you really look at that is fundamentally a conflict between Dr. Doom and Reed Richards. I mean, that is the crux of that story, and it is kind of a culmination of all of Hickman's stuff. minus his X-Men stuff, which that's the other thing we have to throw in here is we have all these
Yeah.
these Fox properties that have barely started to kind of find their way into here, minus Deadpool, which I assume we're going to get an announcement for at Comic-Con. And so I think, we have an idea of what this is, but the roadmap of that, I think, like, we don't even have an idea as to when the next Avengers movie is going
Right.
to be,
So-
and the sixth movie of phase 1 was Avengers, and we're at that point already
Yeah.
in phase 4. So I do think there is some level of like, I don't really know what we're going to, and I don't necessarily mind not having an idea, but I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too by having these giant multiversal type things and then having these standalone adventures, and we're not really having that kind of back and forth to varying degrees of success. I think kind of makes it so that you don't know really what you're walking into when you go and see one of these. It's like, is this going to be something that's kind of this keystone part of, the MCU for the next 15 years, or is it going to be this kind of one-off adventure thing? And,
Right.
I it's okay to have both, but they need to be better than what they are right now. And that's just not the case.
Yeah. So you got some great points there. And like, I think that like when we were talking about like the heaviness of things, right? There's so many, and again, there were so many opportunities, I think, to make sense out of it and lead us somewhere. With Loki, what are like Loki, Spider-Man, anything where you've introduced the multiverse, right? Like where you've played with that. WandaVision, like any of these movies, right? Doctor Strange, but every single time they've been gun shy and haven't really like gone any kind of level of distance. And I feel like if they had done this with and like had the multiverse bleed over, then you could have brought the Fantastic Four in. Like you could have started to bring that and make sense out of that. So leading into Secret Wars, like I think that's something you could have accomplished. But they're gun shy. The other part is like the way that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been handling like serious concepts and ideas, such as cancer and like DID with Moon Knight. It's like we want to make something that's like really serious and tackle some serious things, but we can't really do it. So like whenever there is something that's like heavy in any way, it's like, well, we're just going to kind of brush over it or make this just a part of something else. And I think that's a pretty big mistake. And I think that gives me like a lack of faith in what we're going into, because there's no, like you said, we don't know, and it's not a problem. Like not knowing is fine, but when it starts to play with trust, because it's like these aren't great. Like I love Love and Thunder. Like I think it was a fun time and I had a great time seeing it. I just had a great time, but was it like good or a great movie? No, but like, and that's fine, but that's just indicative of like the overall Marvel vision of everything else, because I don't remember the last time I could say that like I saw a truly good Marvel movie like out like in this phase.
Your point, I think the MCU is constituted is not really equipped or has been fundamentally built to handle these weighty things.
Yeah.
And even when we get something like in Black Panther, where we have this idea of like really grappling with some like pretty heavy themes, I think the reason why we had this, because we have someone like Ryan Coogler, who I think is like really adept at handling those things, right? I mean, even in Ragnarok, Taika kind of plays with this idea of kind of like colonialism, but it's very surface level and is like not you can ascribe as much weightiness to it as you want it to be. And I think you can go, you can build a lot of on top of what I think is a pretty rusty foundation or unstable foundation. But if you really start to scrutinize that, there's not a lot of there. And then I think it's the same thing with Love and Thunder. I do think like the idea of, Hunter, I really liked the movie that you were pitching about Gore sort of having this like fundamental like crisis of faith, and we get parts of that, but there's not. It's just a kernel of an idea that then is kind of ushered aside because we have to go see Russell Crowe's Zeus talk about orgies for 15 minutes, which is perfectly fun and funny, and I enjoy that. But like, that sequence could have been excluded to have more of that relationship between Gore and what he's doing. And I mean, I don't necessarily need to see all of these things, but one of the things that was slightly frustrating to me is like Gore's god butchering happens almost entirely off screen. And I know there
Yes.
were some versions of that in the supposed 4-hour cut that Taika put together originally, which, we're not going to do a release the Taika cut. Director's cuts are director's cuts for a reason, right? Like that's, you put everything but the kitchen sink in there and then you work down from there. But that is one of the huge impacts of the Jason Aaron story with Gore, is just seeing the kind of the desecration of the universe, and it adds a level of seriousness to Gore that I won't say that the movie doesn't have, because I think Bale is so effective, I think, at making the most of what he has. But I do think there could have been even more of an impact if those things had not been ushered off to the side. The only real investigation we get is with that giant spiked thing that is basically a complete recreation of the Asad Ribic page that that Jason Aaron Thor run. But otherwise, like, there's really not a whole lot of stuff there. And even then, that comes at this sort of expense of Jane talking, or not, I'm sorry, not Jane, of Sif talking about how her arm might be in Valhalla, but she won't be in Valhalla, which is like a good bit. But I think it takes and I realize that they try and do that with Gore kind of kidnapping the kids and stuff like that, but again, to your point, Hunter, the Gore, you have to pick a lane here. It needs to either be the Gore story or it needs to be the Jane story, but it can't be both, in my opinion.
And to be fair, like, and not just the material that Bale was working with was great. Like, it just didn't make sense with the other stuff. Like, from a storytelling aspect, it made sense because, like, point A got to point B, and that of course made sense. So we tied it together. But it was like watching a different movie. And it's not bad, because, like, if you did that story and had the sense of humor attached to it, like, it wouldn't have worked. Like, but it was like watching that movie that I want to see, because it was incredibly serious, it was incredibly dark, it was incredibly weighty, but it was just, that was the only part that was.
Seaberry, I'll get to you in a second, real quick. I did also notice that, like Goodman said, where a lot of the god butchering stuff was off camera, Jane becoming Thor also off camera. It felt like we said, just too much converging, and we have to push stuff aside. And wait a minute, I want to see that stuff. I want to see him butchering all these guys. I want to see Jane becoming Mighty Thor. But I digress. Seaberry, are you gonna say something?
Yeah, they put a Leonard Part 6 on us. You would have enjoyed his first 5 minutes. All right, but look, man, y'all keep saying y'all don't care about not knowing where they're going. I care. I care a lot, like the band.
I care in the context of what they're presenting. Like, in general, I don't need to know, but with where they are and what they're doing, like, I feel like we do. So to clarify, I'm completely with you. I just think that in a philosophical way, like, I don't need to know everything, but where we're dealing with right now, you're 100% right. We do need to know.
I like plans. I like labels. I like schemes. I like devices.
I want to say that's the whole reason why we signed up for this, is the interconnectivity of everything. That's what we loved about Phase 1. Everything was building to the Avengers, everything building to Thanos. We as comic book fans, we want that, because that's what the connected universe was, something we hadn't gotten before. And it was novel. It was, something that was fresh. Now, at this point in Phase 4, not only is it no longer novel, but now it doesn't feel like there's a clear path. And I'm with you guys to the point of, I don't need to know, but Marvel needs to know. And I don't feel like they know what's going on. It doesn't feel like they have everything mapped out. So that's where I fall is, I think they need to figure this out before me.
Yes. And it felt like we were dealing with the multiverse. Like, that felt like what we were going to do. And it's like, that doesn't seem to be like the end game here, sorry the pun, but it's like the one kind of consistence I would say that I can read into this is magic and gods and a galactic thing. So I feel like that's where we're going, but I also need, I need clarity, because this is too much of an investment. But Galactus could come, and that's really cool.
It's a double-edged sword, right? Because we've been kind of conditioned to Vactor's point about kind of expecting all of these things to interlock and interconnect, right? at the same time, like prior when we were first starting out, like we didn't really kind of know to what extent that all these pieces are going to fit together. So it's hard to balance those things because I am okay not knowing, but it is then hard to kind of figure out what all of this is essential versus maybe non-essential, because it's one of those things. It's like, okay, well, and the explaining they have to do and some of this, it's like, for example, like when we see Captain America 4 when that comes out next year or the year after, like how important is Falcon and the Winter Soldier really going to be, right? If we basically have to recap these shows in movie form, it's like, yeah, you might have some extra context there, right? And that's really no different than reading a monthly Thor title and then going on to read War of the Realms,
Crossover,
basically, where
yeah.
a crossover event, right? But you're diluting your brand if you're doing that.
Right.
If you say everything's important, and then actually when it's time to go and look at everything, you can say, oh, actually no, we can just explain.
Right.
We can literally say, if you're Doctor Strange, I'm not here about Westview. Like, then was it really important? And I think that's just the tension where we're at right now. It's like not everything can be important all the time, and it's tough. It's a difficult position, and I'm curious to see how much of this Feige potentially addresses in a little under 2 weeks when they're in 10 days when they're at Comic-Con.
Right.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like I don't like I want to swear here, but like I'm gonna refrain. But like I really, don't care at all if it's like if it's quote unquote important. Like I don't care if it's important as long as it's good. But like you're not giving me good, So like if Loki has nothing to do with anything that's going on with any of the Marvel Cinematic Universe outside the television show, fine. Like because it was actually good and it was a good time and I enjoyed it. Like WandaVision had a great run in the first part, but just turned in just dumb. And then so like it also wasn't important because like we've all seen Doctor Strange. Do you feel like you had to watch WandaVision for that?
No,
in any
because
way?
it felt like Wanda's arc is repeated
Yeah,
in
it's
Doctor
absolutely
Strange.
repeated. It 100% is. And then I'm sure that when I see Captain America 4, like it won't matter that I did not watch Falcon and Winter Soldier because I know who those characters are and it was probably fun, like I'm sure it was. More or less. I like Miss Marvel, but like is it going to impact will it impact any Captain Marvel stuff that's going forward? Probably not, but it's good, so who cares? Because of the story that's there. Like you're telling a good story. Any of the other TV shows like Hawk, that I love the Hawkeye series, right? And I know that was supposed to be what this was based off of, but this wasn't it, man. Like not at all, not in any ways. So I didn't finish it because I was just like, nah, this is a waste of time. And I don't care if it like set up anything else. And I bet if I watch anything afterwards, it won't matter if I watch Hawkeye or not.
I think we're just all in a little bit of Marvel fatigue at this point, and I've gone kind of a roller coaster on the connectivity because for me, the peak was Ralph Boner in WandaVision. Everything after Ralph Boner, I've gone down. Oh, you like Ralph Boner?
No, that was the most insulting thing that I've like experienced from any entertainment thing.
I like that Marvel is kind of doing, I don't know, I like this kind of trolley stuff. Like I like the fact that they brought in the Illuminati only to kill them off in like the most
I'm paying for your stuff. Don't troll me. Like if this was free,
a little jab every now and again is not like the worst thing in the world.
If this was on ABC, you can troll me all you want. But if I'm paying for your content, like, dude, man, look, that was the first thing you offered to us, and it's a troll job. Like, give me a break, dude. Like, oh my god, that was so infuriating, and especially because I love like Evan Peters, and I think he did a great job as Quicksilver, and to bring him in and give him like the costume of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe could do, like that's just insulting, and I hate you for it, and I will never forgive them. Yes. And the last episode was trash. WandaVision.
Lighter trolling on 4chan. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the exact reason why they should continue to do this because of
how
upset you guys are.
No, but I won't. But here's the thing: I won't watch their stuff. Like
I don't think they care.
No, but I mean, like if that were the mentality of I don't know, man. I feel like does anybody really like to be trolled like that? I mean, you might, Goodman.
I don't. It's.
I don't. It's
You know,
annoying to me.
but I do think it's like, I don't know. I'm in sort of a weird position because I cover this stuff. I write a lot about it. I am a fan, but at the same time, like you look at, and I don't want to turn this into like a larger conversation, but it's like fans are wrong sometimes. Like, and sometimes like I think you have to just like, you can't acquiesce to fans all of the time. And I think it's, I think that kind of bait and switch was like was a fun way to kind of have your cake and eat it too. And it sounds like that didn't really work for you, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think there's a line between we're actively trolling and we're poking a little fun at a little bit. And so I think there's a fine line there, and I would rather that Marvel's the only one that can really kind of determine whether or not that's too far or not far enough. But I do think it is important that these companies are not just totally acquiescing to fans all the time, or that's what you get. And Rise of Skywalker. Not to open that conversation.
I completely agree with you, and like I just to clear, like I completely agree. I think that when you play with your audience's money, though, like that's why I say like it's okay here or there, but like when I'm paying for your stuff, like don't troll me too much. And if it was just the Ralph Boner thing, that's fine. But when you come back less than a year later and do the Illuminati, like this is starting to get to be a trend, so don't keep doing this to me. But like if you just did, if I don't trust them now, like I don't think that that's not going to be a continuous thing,
right?
Like I think that it will, because I think they get off on it. So like I think that's almost like a Marvel directive now.
I don't know if I agree with that at all. We're going to get the Illuminati and the 616. It's going to be very different. I think this is their way to have some fun with some casting things, have some fan fulfillment, and then not have it stick around. I don't think we're going to get a consistent troll job from Marvel moving forward. But I think,
I hope that's true. I hope that's true. I don't believe it.
Right.
I hear you, Goodman, but 2 times is a pattern.
Yeah.
3 times is a pattern. 3 times is the pattern. So let's talk a year from now and see, and then we can have that discussion. But
I think Hawkeye was a troll job, though, just in general, though. Like that was.
You mean?
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that, but that series was not as that series was really, I think, sold to us or sort of presented as a kind of one-to-one adaptation of the Fraction series, and that was certainly not the case. That was the MCU doing a karaoke version of that Fraction story. But we're getting slightly off topic here.
I was being flippant and just saying the existence of it was a troll job. That was just
of course. No, that was a point for me to say that, a jumping off point for me to talk largely about how I think that Hawkeye series just was not. It attempted to do what that Fraction series was doing, but it was a pale imitation thereof.
Yeah. So I did want to talk about Gore a little bit more. We talked about kind of his introduction, very much what Hunter was wanting from him. And then we talked about kind of him, the actual butchering of the gods getting pushed aside. I think for me, I love Christian Bale. I think did a great job on the performance. I never felt like Thor was in danger like I did in the comic, and in the Jason Aaron run, Gore was like terrifying. He's something that I was like, how? I literally thought, how is Thor going to beat him? I don't think he's going to make it. And in the movie, it might be because of the comedic tone, but I always felt safe with Thor, and I never felt like Gore was going to kill all the gods. And it ended up just being a magic thing. Oh yeah, I'm just going to wish him away. Instead of in the comic, there's an actual device, a bomb that is going to go off at the beginning of time and take out all the gods. But you go ahead, Hunter.
So my take on that was that it didn't seem like he really wanted to kill Thor, because even Thor kind of agreed after he met all the gods. He was like, these people suck. And I thought that was kind of great too.
And that was actually one of the, and I don't want to spoil too much of the comic for you, but some of the comic was Thor discovering, oh, wait a minute, I should be acting more like a god. There are people who are praying to me, and I should be answering their prayers. I should be helping them. The way that gods have existed, and the way that the status quo has been, the gods are kind of a-holes. They are kind of messed up. And that's what they explored in the comic. But here's another thing, real quick. Have you guys got a weird sense of they didn't know what to do with the whole? And Hunter, you and I have talked about this many times. They're not gods; they're aliens, and so
Mhm.
they're just advanced from us, and they look like
Yeah.
gods to us. But then in this movie, it's like, oh wait, no, they are gods, and there's Zeus, and there he's got the thunderbolt, and then he's talking about the lesser gods, and then and we saw the beginning, the god that Gore has, and it's like, wait a minute, oh, so they are gods, so they're not aliens.
Well, so my take on this, right? So like, no, first it was portrayed that the Asgardians were aliens,
Just
right?
as guardians.
Yeah, that's how it was portrayed. At the same time, it doesn't negate their like the alien aspect at all. Because they just could address themselves as gods now. Because like if you address me as a god consistently, like after I'm like, no, I'm not, or whatever, I'm just a person. Or if I colonize a planet and I'm far more like advanced than the people on this planet or whatever, like if you call me a god, I'm like, yeah, you're right, I am, you know. So I'm just gonna roll with that and then have my nice little like planetary meetup with all the other ones and be like, hey, let's have an orgy, you know. Sounds good to me. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't think it negates that concept, but I don't. So I it's a very, very I have a lot of thoughts on that in general, and I think it's a dangerous topic for me to talk about any further than I already have because it will
Okay.
be 3 hours from now and I won't shut up.
Well, maybe we can come back to that on another note. But I really felt like and again, going into it, this is one of my favorite comic storylines of all time. And I have to kind of temper my expectations because it's not going to be a direct adaptation, kind of like with the Hawkeye thing, where I'm thinking it's going to be the Fraction run and I'm thinking it's going to be, the things that we've seen in the comics. But I felt like Gore should have been like the Joker in Dark Knight, where some men aren't logical. They don't want money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiate with it. They just want to watch the world burn. That's how Gore should have been to me, and I didn't get that from this version that was written on the page. Like I said, Christian Bale's performance great,
Yeah.
but I just didn't think it was on the page. On the
The
script.
the crazy thing is like it terrified me.
I want you to read the comic. And
Oh,
come
don't
back.
worry. Yeah.
Seaberry, you
Yeah.
gonna say something?
I think it's because they added the daughter, man. So that like made them sympathetic, and then it became out because how did they beat him? Look, Gore, you really want love.
It's true.
And then he's redeemed at the end. And again, not to spoil the comic, but that is not the way it goes in the comic. He is not someone to be redeemed and he just wanted love the whole time. And now I understand Gore, because there's always something that we understood about. We could see his point of view. It wasn't just a black and white necessarily. There was a little bit of gray because of the way he was treated. But that, like Seaberry said, that sympathy of, he's got a daughter, and he's doing everything for the daughter, and instead of just wishing for himself and his daughter to be alive, he only wished for his daughter to be alive. And this is kind of a weird, like, the logic at the end kind of was a little bit off to me, but like I said, it just wasn't there for me on the page for Gore to be more menacing and to show that he's killing all the gods, because besides that god at the beginning, I didn't see him kill any other gods. He stole the children.
There is that footage in when the Guardians are doing, which the Guardians are like, might as well have not been in this at all, other than just the fact that like this is something that was ported over from Endgame. Nevertheless, we see some of that in, I think, kind of like the aftermath of some of that stuff in the visuals that the Guardians are going through. But I don't think it's and we hear about it from Zeus and some of the other gods in Omnipotent City. Like we hear, there is kind of this crazy person running around killing gods. But Vactor, to your point, the ending, I think, is a little bit too kind of lovey-dovey, I think, for my sensibilities, which is also a problem I kind of ran up against with Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's just the kind of this like, love conquers all thing, just like as a story beat, like doesn't work super well for
too
me
neat,
personally.
tied up in a bow at the end.
But I do think it works for this more humanistic, understandable, relatable version of Gore, which I think is even more so than kind of that understandable point of view that we get in the comics. Like I do think they kind of soften his edges here a little bit
Yeah.
more
Oh,
than
yeah.
they do. And so I think because of that, we don't get a Gore that is ultimately terrifying. As terrifying as he is in the comic. And I
Right.
think, it's okay for these things to change and evolve. There has not been a straight one-to-one adaptation in anything in the MCU, with the exception of maybe Winter Soldier. But even then, you have all the stuff with Hydra in there.
Right.
So, I think it's fine for these things to grow and evolve. But I think part of what disappoints me is how good Bale is with what he has. You just want there to be more there and have him to have more of an opportunity to lean into that menacing side, because when he has an opportunity to do it, it is really effective.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just think this is just another kind of nail in the coffin for Marvel doesn't know how to handle villains. And this goes back to Obadiah Stane and Iron Man. Like, the weakest
terrible.
part of all the MCU movies is the villains. And it really
with the exception of Loki,
well, yeah,
who is a character in this, whose presence his absence I do really think that you feel. And I kind of admire these movies moving on as Loki has kind of gone off and done his own thing. But I mean, Loki's arc within the MCU is very, very tragic. And I do think that tragedy that Thor has befallen throughout the course of these movies does kind of inform kind of that milieu that he's stuck in, that kind of, mid-god crisis that he's having basically in the very beginning. So I think it's effective in that way. But I do think you feel the absence of Loki in this, especially because him and Thanos, I think, are really, and Killmonger to a certain extent, are really the villains that have been really, really effective in these movies. And so not having Loki here for once takes some readjusting, I think.
Definitely.
Well, so like with how you presented that, like the most effective villains in the MCU were Killmonger,
Loki, and Thanos.
And I feel like all of those were the relatable ones. Thanos wasn't really a bad guy, not really. Let's be honest. Like, is it a terrible thing to reduce population? Yes,
right,
because it shouldn't be in your power. But like understanding like where that comes from. I'm gonna not say anything else about that because it's gonna sound really horrible. So just let's not say that. But then like with Loki was not a bad guy. Killmonger is definitely not a bad guy. And then I'd even say that's I would classify Gore in that category, because but so it was like the blade or the sword corrupted him, like, yes, he was angry, but like, and he wanted revenge, but that was what caused all of that to happen. Once the blade breaks, kind of makes sense that, okay, well, now I just want to bring my daughter back. Because he wasn't a bad guy. And I'm a sucker, so like I always really do love like the power of love stories. So like that's always going to work on me no matter what. I watch Hallmark movies. I don't care. Marcus, you shake your head at me.
Yeah. Well, I think, Seaberry, let's give you the last word before we wrap up this review of Love and Thunder.
More Valhalla would be cool. I mean, Hercules would be cool. That's a guy that I got hip to in the 80s, when he was on the Avengers. Just make it make sense, man. Like, come on, Feige. Kevin Feige, like, you're better than this. Or at least been better than this. Like, come on, man. Make it make sense. I need a through line. I need some connectivity. I need to see the big bad a little bit more. And I mean, like, and I also hope you're not just, giving us all this Wong to like kill him off or something. Because, I really don't trust him. Because a whole lot of, look at Wong.
We know two Wongs don't make a white. Yeah. I think
it's quickly, Vactor. It's funny you bring that up, Seaberry, because this is not. I'm taking this concept from the Big Picture podcast, which I'm a big fan of. But a point they brought up on that is like, at what point are we going to start getting payoff to some of these post-credits tags, especially for the stuff that we're getting in Phase 4? Like, we have seen the stuff with the 10 rings and two, in Shang-Chi, both with, you know, Shang-Chi actually being potentially like one of the more powerful Avengers, and then also, and sort of this like some sort of threat that is out in the universe that is coming for the rings, or the origins of the rings.
Yeah.
You know, then we have, you know, the stuff with Herc, the stuff with Valhalla here. There's just a lot of stuff that's coming. It's like,
Clea
I think
pulling Doctor Strange into.
Well, that tracks a little bit more with kind of the incursion stuff, things that we're going to see in Secret Wars, right? Like I can look at that and basically say like, okay, that's probably where this is going to go. But like this 10 Rings thing is like, is that going to be a Disney Plus TV show? Is that setting up for a Shang-Chi sequel? Like, what is happening with like the rings and kind of this like global kind of thing, or what's happening with Harry Styles being Eros? Like, all of these things are kind of just like, I don't know at what point these things are going to pay off.
Yeah.
Or if they are even going to pay off. So like, what's the point of being invested in some of these things at this point?
Well, it almost seems like they're each going to their own individual. Like, okay, Eternals, they're setting up Eternals 2, and we talked about the Clea. That, okay, put that over in Secret Wars, but nothing seems to be lining up, like connecting everything together. It's just they're each individual stories, and I want to see more interconnectivity. That's my personal thing. But I think we all kind of had the same. We liked it. We didn't love it. We wish it would have been just a little bit more. Had more time to breathe. Oh, Hunter, I think is the most.
Yeah, I legit loved it. Like,
Okay.
I did. It just, I will admit that it was not like a great movie.
Hunter,
Yeah,
I loved it for personal reasons.
Right.
If you had to give it a star rating, what would you put it at?
So if I were giving it a star rating, I would say 50 stars. But that's because I did enjoy it a lot. If I'm
out of 100,
out of 5, give me out of 5.
That was if I'm writing a review on it where other people are going to be listening to like what, and not thinking about it through the filter that I'm thinking about through it, probably like a 7.5. Oh, wait, out of 5. So let's say 3.5. 3.5. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, we're all kind of, as Seaberry said, mid on it. Not the worst of the MCU, not
at
the
all.
best.
One thing I really quickly wanted to touch on, that I do want to give some credit. You know, I think one of the main issues that I know a lot of more, I don't want to say this without sounding overly pretentious, but a lot of, let's call it spade a spade, more pretentious, I think, film critics have levied complaints to the MCU for not being overly visually distinctive, and credit where credit is due, between
100%.
a lot of the stuff in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, a movie that I think is probably my favorite of this phase so far. And it sounds like I'm kind of an outlier on that. But what Raimi was able to bring to that film in terms of visuals, I think, was very, very impressive and very unlike anything we've seen in the MCU this far.
Right.
And the sequence in the Shadow Realm, I thought was incredible and extraordinarily well done. And I think it stands up as like one of the best, like unimpeachably, like one of the best individual like visual sequences of the MCU. So I just wanted to reference that really quickly because I think it is so striking, and you kind of have that like Harryhausen style of you know, with the creepy crawlies kind of moving around like that way, and just that whole sequence I think was really inspired, and I want to see more of that stuff moving forward.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we all enjoyed some parts of it, and hopefully we will get. You said Thor is going to be returning, so hopefully the next outing, the next time we see Thor, we will all enjoy him a little bit more. So that's going to do it for this episode of We Love Comics, the show where we love comics, and you should too. I want to give a big thank you to Mr. William Goodman for joining us. We very much appreciate all of your contributions, and please let us know where we can find your work on the internet.
Sure. So you can find me at twitter.com/GoodmanW, at GoodmanW. It's probably the best place. But if you keep your eyes out on Complex, that's where most of my work is nowadays. And most of the stuff that is probably relevant to the stuff that you guys cover on this. And some odds and ends here and there on GQ as well.
Nice. Mr. Seaberry, you talked a little bit about CineSundry, but tell us what's coming up this week.
Yeah, man. Well, the last 2 reviews I recorded were Elvis and Thor Love and Thunder. So look out for one of those this week. The best way to do it is go to the On Location Memphis YouTube channel or their Facebook page. And that's pretty much what I got popping. And also you can listen to past episodes of Black Nerd Power on the Kazukian app. That's KUDZUKIAN. And I would appreciate your support.
Yeah. And Mr. Hunter Kent, what are you streaming this week?
Well, I'm continuing to stream Life is Strange True Colors. It is I'm still heartbroken from the first chapter, but I'm going to be picking that back up. And that's going to be at twitch.tv/I am Hunter Kent. I also wanted to tell the people next week on something coming in the future, we do have this book picking up.
Yes, we forgot to mention we are doing a Book of the Month club. So we're starting with Naomi season 1. Brian Michael Bendis. Can he bring back the magic of Miles Morales? We will tell you on the next episode. And we also have some other big things coming down the pipe for this show, but we'll tell you on next week's episode. We'd like to thank you for listening. Don't forget, leave us a 5 Thanos review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave us a comment down below on your thoughts on Love and Thunder if you're watching on YouTube. Don't forget to check out the Geek So to Speak podcast network, where we have the video game podcast, the Sandbox Gamers, the Star Trek podcast, TREKnological, and the Geek News podcast, Geek So to Speak. All of those things can be found at geeksotospeak.com/network. And I love everyone who is listening to this. If you're watching this show right now on YouTube, I love you.
Brothers and sisters.
Wow, we're doing Brother Love.
Because Brother Love loves comics, and you should too.